Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a podcast that is focused on the unknown elements of reality. A title arose to me, so fascinating that even though I'm exhausted, I'm like, I have to talk about it. And it's this idea where I've termed it when your soul opens the mind from within. And in the subtitle, these sentences came to me, which I wrote: dance like freedom in the beauty of your own marvelous reality. Your eyes are the world's gift to you. You see, human beings, when it comes to communication, the force that moves or inspires communication is that what is there actually and really to say? What is the intent behind a communication in the void? And the nature of communication is due to the multidimensional nature of how we experience our existence. There's a private world behind our eyes, and there's a public world, public server to reality in front of our eyes. And so communication is to share that which is ahead behind the eyes to that which is present in front of one's eyes. You know, there was a time where I used to be shy, and then I realized 4.5 billion years of evolution ingrained in the design of the genetics of this creature that we are. We are designed with ears and a mouth. You know, we are designed to express and receive reality. And so really we are that kind of force, but it depends on every individual that's different. You know, some people conceptually like the idea of multidimensionality, but when it comes to the context of their experience, it could frighten them. That means true advanced human communication is a fearless observance of a spectrum of possible states of mind. And there's going to probably come something like a dictionary. I'm kind of like predicting this ahead of time. But just like there's a dictionary for words, there's going to come a dictionary for different states of mind. And these different states of mind, mythologies of certain cultures in the East, we see that there's a concept of demigod, right? So there's like human level, then there's demigod, then there's the absolute God, you know. Contrary to popular belief, polytheism resolves itself into a monotheistic truth. All religious realizations are responses to the inconceivable. Your soul opens the mind's door from within. It's very strange because everything we experience externally when it comes to the nature of the brain and mind is within. That means light enters our eyes for a reason. Oxygen enters our lungs for a reason. Karma enters consciousness for a reason. And hence, the reason of a multidimensional truth is the realization that you are not alone. So you see, something that at least religion to me, religions are, I've said this before, if people are like Mr. Within, well, how do you see religion? I'll be like, religions and the prophets in history to me were like time travelers. All all ideological systems are time traveling interventions to some degree. Okay, what is art to a lesser dimension can in some sense be the standard. That means greater dimensions, the freedom of minds can surpass what the eyes have been given. I think every human being, and it's not just every human being, every conscious entity tries to, I don't know why tonight I like to use this word, but every conscious entity attempts to resolve itself. And what that means is the biggest problem of consciousness is that why is it here? And it's another way of saying what's the meaning of existence. So I have noticed that human beings, we behave through objective realities, then we became so conscious as to sophisticated evolutionarily that evolution made an object turn to a subject to itself. It pretty much converted an unconscious objectivism into conscious subjectivity, even though implied in the hard problem of consciousness, the conscious subjectivity is so mysterious that it's as if when I say there's a private world behind your eyes, what imagination is how much you have allowed yourself to learn from your own mind. And my biggest aim really to advance civilization, like there was a time where I asked myself, why should I care? Why should I care for the future? There was a time where I experienced such a momentary bliss where I was like, why even have any sort of egoic effort at all in this in samsara? And you know what it was? There was this force, this rhythm that found me. I don't know what it was, but it was like the complexity of qualia. Qualia is the term. It's very fascinating. Our body, like we need the body to exist to have the projection of a conscious mind, but we need a conscious mind to know that there's a body. Do you understand? Like, there's this concept in philosophy called the predestination paradox. YouTube video of this soon and have millions of viewers, Because let me tell the viewers something. The mind has a potential to animate any sort of archetype, and these archetypes endlessly grow, and especially when we're in the information age, like in 2 hours you can absorb information unbelievably. So what it is that really the value and meaning and quality of our lives is the subjective context that the object conceptualizes in. What I'm trying to tell the viewers is that this world is way more mysterious than it could have been ever taught in the educational system, and that whoever you are listening, we must be explorers of the greater future, a future that is going to, like, future generations must be born with such visions of greatness that our problems will seem inferior. Like in 2022, they asked somebody, like, what do you want to be, a young man, when you grow up? Imagine, like, they did this survey and asked young kids what they want to be grow up, and imagine all the young kids were like, I want to be a top G. I want to be a billionaire. I want to be a motivational speaker. I want to be this. And so at some point you begin to see, when did civilization stop thinking for itself to the degree that it needs emotional filtering? Do you understand what it means? That means people are not actually living with a consideration of how moments sequentially happen through cause and effect modes. What I'm trying to say is that most people are hovering and floating in the emotion that their own mind generates, but in reality there's many ways we could stand and look at the world. And whoever is listening, write something in the comment section. Write, let's say, write where you're listening from. Anyways, to continue. So, I'll divide this into two parts. And first part, I'll just try to talk about the geometry of the title. So when I've written when your soul opens the mind's door, here we have a bunch of considerations, right? So when is a consideration of an event, soul is a question mark. We gotta know what soul means, and then we gotta know what do we mean by open. What sort of open? Are we opening a box, or are we opening the nature of the mind to the truth of reality, which right? So so it's a mysterious verb, okay? And let's say the soul is a mysterious noun, but the soul is inconceivable technically. And then we come here and say the mind's door. So this is where we have to wonder about, okay, how can we see the mind as a door? In what moments of our lives has mind been a door? And we totally know, especially if you've lived years on this planet, you know that the door of the mind is when we log into the conscious waking state, and we're in the conscious waking state, and then when we sleep we log out of the conscious waking state automatically. And then the concept of what do we mean by within? Okay, so how does the mind's door open from within? Before going further, I want to share a quote from the Sufi mystic poet called Rumi. He says, "I have lived on the edge of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. It opens. I have been knocking from the inside." So what it means is that when the human intelligence, let's say projected through the dualistic framework of a self and a world, okay? So everybody's like a character in a story of the world. And what knowledge is just like back in the day, warriors sharpened swords. We readjust our inner realms to the outer realms in accordance to the nature or the true nature of how it happens. So what I'm trying to say is that in ancient cultures, they if you looked at a yogi from thousands of years ago, let's say roaming the Himalayas in search of the ultimate enlightenment, the ancient yogis had this perception that this world in front of our eyes was an illusion and was a dream. In modern times, we call dreams simulations, but in ancient times, it was a dream. And because they saw the outer realms as a dream, they had this extremist renunciation to it. Right, so it's as if our earliest ancestors, it's hilarious, the earliest human beings, they actually opened their eyes in this world and they were like, okay, WTF, I want to get out of here, and so they were trying to transcend this dimension. They were trying to get out of this earth plane, which evidently in modern times we've kind of been locked into, okay? We're inside a building, and the yogis were trying to get outside of this building, but it's not a building, it's the conception of the subjective position of a world. So this concept of going within wasn't that Like literally there's a door in your mind, and like behind your brain there's a door, and that little door opens. It's not like this is not like just limited to the poetry of neural activity. You know, the lightning storms, you know, and the jar made of calcium, you know. Here, let me say it like this. In the ancient yogi wanted to wake up from the dream of this world, right? So they were like, okay, if the world is a simulation, how do I get out of it? They were like tripping. They're like, no way, I'm in a world right now? I thought I was eternal presence of everything, you know? Oh man. Sorry guys, I'm gonna find a different song, you know. There we go. Where has 4.5 billion years of evolution led us? And when we call ourselves human, are those just sounds or symbols, or is there something more in the living life force that has moved us up like so far, you know? Sometimes I feel I don't know how to say it, but it's kind of like a moment comes in this life where you press pause on the video game of the story you've told yourself it is. And in that stillness and silence, you suddenly realize you don't know who you are. And this is the first like preliminary step before actual enlightenment. Okay? And when I say actual enlightenment, I'm saying before that moment where you're free, before freedom was needed. Okay? So that's the nature. And so when you realize you don't know what it is that is looking through your eyes, and you don't know what the edge of this world is, and you don't know how the species has convinced itself in the daydream of the technology of linguistic technology, of its linguistic technology. Who we are is actually 8 billion unknown beings that share similar skeletal structure. The nature of each of our minds acts sovereign, acts different, you know, and, you know, we're living in a world where people compare themselves to such a degree that they forget they're here to be new people. And you know, the most important thing I could tell the youth, realize the value of what you can see and what no one else in the world can. You see, we're reaching a point where the species has been so inefficient where automatically as a backup system, the heroic archetype is going to resurface. So what that means is people are going to get bored with chaos. So imagine like some person was like, anarchy is freedom, and the world became post-apocalyptic Mad Max anarchy, and the people were like, okay, for how many millions of years, like how many thousands of years are we going to live like this, right? So the species gets bored, and that's when dictators wake up from, you know, the dream of control, realizing it's the permission of the movement of souls. You You see, this is the feeling I have. There's something they asked this quantum physicist. I forget the guy's name. They asked him, "Hey man, what are your quantum physics experiments like?" And this was at the beginning of quantum physics, okay? And this quantum physicist says, "You know, man, it's kind of like we took a jaguar outside of its natural environment, the forest, and we put it in a cage, and the jaguar is all psychologically like scared and de-jaguarized, right?" And that's what we're thinking, like that's what our experiment is. And so the true realization that came with quantum physics is how ready is the species to experience matter, the movement of matter in space without a consideration of time. Like that's when psychological boundaries even break. You know, imagine you're somebody who thinks you have one personality. Imagine you're somebody who thinks you have multiple personalities. Imagine you're a mathematician, you think you have infinite personalities. So, you know, it's like the mathematician's like infinity plus one, infinity minus one, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But what I'm sorry guys, I'm getting carried away. What I'm trying to say is that what we ask is that how do we know that the multiple is present at once? Consciousness is an ultimate singularizer of the moment, okay? So it's kind of like the world is doing its own thing and man is doing its own thing, and there's like a Venn diagram where there's this connecting point. And I think oftentimes, you know, the species is not like I was reading a World Health Organization statistic which was saying like 280 million people on the planet are depressed. You know, first I'm like how was that survey conducted? That's like something award worthy. But anyways, this idea of 280 million people depressed means there's 280 million conscious entities in the space-time continuum who have been convinced that they cannot be a causal force in their moment of being. So what that means is the lion is so convinced it's a sheep that it doesn't want to even get up to be a lion. Excuse me. So where I'm going with all this is I'm trying to tell people that this concept of going within, this whole notion is that pretty much you're this conscious entity, you're like this like spotlight on a cosmic elemental stage, or let me say it this way, you're like a candle, okay? And so this candle, it's like the wick of the candle is the brain, the wax of the candle is our biological system. And the glow of the candle and the flame of the candle is the cognitive system, and let's say the glow of the candle is what happens or what consciousness reveals. So what I'm trying to say is that every human being is like this container of energy, this growing, being cultivated container of energy. So we know that, okay, like with the advantage we have is that we are some sort of energy. And what I mean by this is that okay, what's the exact situation? In any sort of, let's say, act of articulation, what is the starting point? What is the foundation or the simplest starting point of the conceptual reality? Okay, so I'm like, okay, we have this biological evolutionary body, 4.5 billion in the years in the making. Imagine they gave you a 4.5 billion year old Ferrari to drive, you know. So imagine they gave you a 4.5 billion year old biological system, and we don't know, like even yogis are trying to figure out how to you know, fast and just stare at the sun for nutrition. But what I'm saying is this is the starting point. We're on this sort of world and this landscape. There's a biological system, and then there's an ecosystem. I said, I'm pretty much trying to say through the tunnels of the cognitive system and the biological system. It's like attention through those two forces acting at the same time. Pretty much, what do we do with this ability to notice a world in a void? And we're this energetic container that's around, let's say, 100-year lifespan. Let's say technologies in the future, they make like next level apples. People were like, you know, an apple keeps a doctor away. Imagine in the future you eat an apple and you get like immortal strength or something, you know. You're like, is this apple purple? Who cares? You become an immortal when you bite it. You know, hilariously paralleling this to a theological context, it's like when Adam and Eve, you know, bit from the fruit of knowledge, they traded eternal truth with an immortal simulation. But anyways, back to this idea, right? So there's this biological system. That means, what do we do with our existence for 100 years? What do we do with the ability of us to notice every day and realize that we can pilot our attention? So that's what I'm trying to get people to do, to realize you have a DNA nobody else has. It's like your existence is like you're this mysterious. Show us if we're playing the instrument properly or not. If we are where we are needed. And you know, this could totally make another talk where I talk about the destiny of passion. Oh. There's something about, like, what do we do with the world and what is the mind that is trying to love everything do in valuing everything? You see, oneness is a sort of singular context, but civilization is a massive multidimensional system. And so to me, I ask myself, okay, 8 billion creatures on a rock, like why should there be like creatures in a weird world where spheres are just hovering everywhere? Like, why should we even be here? And you know what it is? To me, it's kind of like that moment where, I don't know what show it was, but it was like that moment where they say, the show must go on. The show must go on. What does that mean? That means you snap your snapshot conclusions, subjective conclusions of the objective reality eventually remind you, yo, whatever belief we cover our eyes with, life pushes us forth. That's the beautiful nature of it. It's like, really what it is it's kind of like, let me tell you something bizarre, right? I mean, not bizarre, but like a fascinating idea. There's this idea, other people in literature have spoken about it, where it's kind of like everybody's walking towards their grave. But the cool thing about being a conscious mind is that you're not walking alone. You're walking with the presence of your whole world. So it's as if, like, imagine somebody who, like, this might be a bizarre concept, but I would say we can have the idea of the archetype of the orphan applied to the body, mind, and soul. An orphaned mind could be like somebody who's physically not an orphan, but they feel disconnected with this, let's say, cultural, social system. There's many ways the attention moves, right? And I've been waking up every day being like, yo, what are we doing here? And you know, I've come to this beautiful realization. Knowledge does the best it can, and then it watches as if the unknown already knows where everything needs to go. What that means is, like, if the species flips the context, right? Like, people right now want, like, they are paying, like, it's kind of what the economical system, and that's for another episode, my criticism on it. But what it is that knowledge, it's like if civilization was like a pancake and it was flipped around. Imagine educational systems, there would no longer be students and teachers, there would just be explorers with different ranking systems. The ranking systems that certain video games have is way more sophisticated than how universities nowadays are organized. Like, it's hilarious. You know? So, what is this moment when you feel like your soul is opening the mind's door from within? So what I've experienced is, like, I've been this, like, subjective entity at the beginning of my life, and at some point, like, it all stopped making sense, or I didn't have the willpower to overcome the problems that were, like, making life meaningless for me. And so it was as if I found myself alone in this moment where I was like, who is having these problems, right? It's as if you're trying to solve a problem and you keep looking at this geometry of the problem, and then you suddenly ask, wait a minute, what if the solution of the problem has to do with who is looking at it rather than what the problem exactly is? It's like, imagine that guy, like, in front of King Arthur when it was his turn to move the sword. He kept trying it, and he's like, yo, what the fuck? Like, what is this? Why isn't this moving? And then King Arthur does it, and it works, and he's like, what the fuck? And imagine that guy goes to King Arthur and says, hey, man, I did most of the work, you know? I loosened it up for you, you know? And the king's like, all right, man, here's, like, I don't know, like a town. Go run a town for me. But anyways, back to this idea. It's a moment where the selfless nature of attention, what it means is that it all stops making sense and you're left with yourself. But you're left with a self that doesn't feel like an object to physically do anything, and doesn't feel like a subject to do anything, and it's pretty much being the space where the archetype of the self and the physical body are. So what I'm trying to tell people is that what qualia is that behind our eyes we have access to the brain overlaying upon the whole moment another version of the moment. We are like, the brain is constantly simulating, like, to communicate, is like riding the waves of all the factors in the moment that are, like, influencing the moment. what it is like experiencing selflessness. Okay. Sorry guys, needed an intermission there. I might have to speed up this episode. Okay. There is an existential opportunity that allows there to be an experiential opportunity. And the greatest experiential opportunity seems to be creativity. And what creativity seems to be is how the unknown discoveries are kind of, translated for normality. It's kind of fascinating. It's like what surrounds the walls of the kingdoms of normality is the absurd. There was this show called Attack on Titan where humanity was like surrounded by these walls that were saving them from these giants that were trying to like destroy humanity. The same is going on for human consciousness and unconscious. The unconscious seems to be the realm of the absurd. It's so fascinating. I think something no philosopher expected is that human consciousness would reach a point where it would ask itself, for how long do I want to be human? Do you believe that? That means we're reaching a point where technology is doing so much of the work for us that we're like, okay, if technology can do it, why should we? And human beings are going to just become kind of either oblivious hedonists trapped in their own dreams. Or the advanced humanity will be a beam of clarity. Literally, we've reached the point where I would say the most inefficient point in Kali Yuga. You know what it is? Imagine one Jedi with like a white lightsaber, or like a, let's say, purple lightsaber. One Jedi, imagine one Jedi, let's say an orange. Like one Jedi being thrown in like the training camp of like future Sith Lords. You reach a point where you're left with your own force, your own life force. To me, my soul is like music. And by music, I mean it's like that moment where you hear something so beautiful that your inner realms have moved on their own. There's this old story where it says there's like, this little Cherokee kid, runs to his grandfather chief, who was like in a meeting with all the chiefs of all the different tribes. To be the same height level as his grandson, and all the leaders of all the other chiefs that were in the meeting are listening to see what kind of story he tells his grandson. And he says, as many would expect, he says, inside every person there is a good wolf and a bad wolf. And these two wolves are fighting. And he looks at his grandson and smiles, but then he looks at the chiefs like with intensity and then smiles. Right, as if he's sharing the same story that the chiefs need to hear too. But the grandpa had said these wolves are always fighting, so the grandson says, "Grandpa, which wolf wins?" And like the last sentence of an incredible poem, the grandfather says, "The one you feed." What are we feeding our life force to? And this might sound bizarre, but it's the case. A candle is a martyr of illumination. And when I say martyr, I'm not talking about like the militaristic sense. I'm saying that like every day we wake up, we have sacrificed who we were yesterday to be who we are now. So the consciousness of the human being is constantly, the attention, the consciousness is piloting through multiple contexts of reality in every moment. So my experience so far has been that you find a moment where nothing makes sense. You notice how much of it is unknown. You bask how everything is being everything regardless. It's as if once we check off everything on the list, the only thing left is the advanced human archetype. No longer you're a creature bound to levels. Okay. Too many intermissions this episode. Anyways. I keep telling myself this is gonna be the last episode, and then I find myself back here. I don't know what it is, but at some point you just have to rely on your own life force. Then you get to see how your own soul looks like poetically, which is another way of saying you access your original karma. And for many, their original karma could be dehumanized. Like, that's a very important concept to consider. So, where can I take the attention of viewers? I'll go to the subtitle. When I say dance like freedom in the beauty of your own marvelous reality, I'm saying this is because sometimes the world convinces us of its perfection. But behind everyone's eyes, a question mark glows. What really humanity is our knowledge is a boat, and we're using it to sail the unknown cosmos. Everything is serving the greatness of the future to come. Whether every industry, how would I say it? It's kind of like history laughs at economical and political systems. Because when will the world realize it's a performance and it's a privilege? There will come a time where it will be seen to be alive, to have anything move on its own will be a sort of sacredness, right? That means like the Jainists were so ahead of their time because they had realized that if you had all the technologies that make you no longer rely on eating an animal or killing an insect, it's like we are the authorization of the greatness of the cosmos to itself. We are the poetry of the gods staring back at them. So, and when I say your eyes are the world's gift to you, I mean at some point the person's like, how much am I a person? Like it's like are like if the body is made of the periodic table, if manifestation is the periodic table, So it's hilarious because the idea of me and my name is like a subjective ownership. It's like an invisible viewer is owning an object as a subject. Just like we have a driver's license, we have a mind for the soul. You know, that mind is the idea of the soul. We are pilots of consciousness ultimately. And there's an incredible wisdom in human beings' ability to confront situations. Think of it this way, it's a ratio. So different minds have different acquaintances. So think of it this way, some beings have, let's say, okay, let's entertain a Buddhic, yogic, transmigratory approach. And so let's say like beings who are alive now have had millions of incarnations or whatever. Just like how there's a body, a biological body in a world, the world would be a body for an attention that is constantly incarnated into different worlds. What it means is that our mind is a bookmark, but what the book is the presence of the whole cosmic infinity. We are alive now to assist life. That means at some point I was like, okay, let's say I become, the most important person on the planet. But then I asked myself, okay, then what? Then I would realize I would like everybody to become the most important person on the planet. So what it means is from the start, like a mighty archer, the arrow of our vision is pointed far. There's different ways to, let's say, resolve conflicted states of mind. Okay, for me, I think usually that my approach is speed. So sometimes when I'm like, let's say, an unsettling thought enters my mind, it's like in that moment I either speed up my mind to see the destiny of the unsettling thought, or I slow it down to a point where the thought was never here. Humorously, we're all living lives that the whole cosmos is secretly documenting. And let me tell you something hilarious. Just like we have the idea of doppelgangers, okay, like somebody who looks like somebody else on the other side of the planet, I would say there is doppelganger civilizations in the cosmos. There are civilizations who are similar. There's like a Mr.Within in that civilization. It was like, yeah, are we ready to advance the whole thing? We're like, what? But once the games of heaven are complete, once the person has played with immortality and infinity, the mind will seek peace. And let me tell you what peace is. Peace is the most powerful being realizing that where that power came from. It's as if the greatest person on earth realized, the gates of paradise were made of a humble substance. I don't know, it's the nature of mind. For me, just like they say clothing is like showing people's sense of mind or their sense of self, right? I think that a person's ideological constitution, it's kind of like three angles to it. Like, this is how I'm approaching it at least. I'm like, okay, there's a biological existential destiny. Hopefully I figure that out. And then there's a subjective destiny. It's like it wasn't enough that I just existed, I was alive, but what did that life do? And then comes the concept of living, the idea of purpose, an opportunity of an existential evolution that has brought forth a subjective free will. You are now a capable entity able to direct a certain part of the cosmos. So it's as if whoever you are listening to me for a second, just put your right hand on your left shoulder and your left hand on your right shoulder, and for a second hug yourself and honor all the periodic table that has come to assist your consciousness. Honor existence, for it is allowing experience to dance. So for me, my mind has an incredible reverence for my biological existence. It's kind of like, it's strange, but aside from how it may appear, there's moments where I feel like, this might sound bizarre, but it's like the concept of me belonged to my free will, but my body was just how the world was allowing me to be it for a little while. Consciousness is how we have entered the greatest event, regardless of the ticket price. There will be many advanced beings, human beings born in the future, and these advanced human beings will have an option to ignore the past or to preserve it. And those who preserve it will end up becoming the leaders of humanity. Because let me tell you what the past is. The vision of our ancestors are just probabilities of how great the world could have been. For me, I'm acting like a universal being. I'm like, okay, I got bored of just being like the idea of a human on a planet. I am consciousness in the cosmos. And this consciousness in the cosmos is here now. It's like that person's like, okay, I believe in God, but God, if you hear me, why am I here? And it's like at that moment, the silence is like an ultimate answer. Imagine the person's like, God, should I worry about, karma? And imagine that God, the person shouted that to the sky and saw there was silence. And then the person's like, okay, silence. I think God's saying yes. He didn't say no. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying man's interaction with greater dimensions of perception is dependent on how he has contained those dimensions. We may think that the outer realms needs to change before our inner realms can, but this is the flaw, that when we realize the inner realm is left to us. So for me, all those people on the planet who have, let's say, turbulent psychologies, what's going to happen is you're going to realize there's an airplane waiting for you. You're like a pilot in an airplane who hasn't realized the airplane steering wheel. And the airplane steering wheel is how the mind, if the mind becomes your ally, it can guide you with great vision. So what it is it's like, it's kind of strange. It's like simultaneously as we're being a soul that's like using an ego to like move an object. This unknown soul. Simultaneously, it's like the world has a preference, and I've felt this since my childhood. I have felt this in every moment of my life, where it's just aside from where I am. Beautiful, because to me the mind is left with its own potential. It's as if like it's like, does the lion want to stand with the sheep, or should its roar bring forth a new reality? For me, I'm like 8 billion creatures on a planet Okay, extinction, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we have 8 billion creatures. Like if every, let's say, genius on the planet, or a scholar or academic, or any intelligent person, or every person on the planet, imagine we gave them this problem. And let's say this is one of Mr. Within's like mighty problems of reality, okay? What do we do with 8 billion creatures on a rock, where each of them are in their own bubble, but they can also come outside of their bubble and realize there's a greater reality to work towards? So what I'm trying to tell the viewers is that don't be afraid of what you are. Rather try to understand how fear is when the moment is more unknown than known. So if we attempt to understand it, something about our perspective of the fear will change. I don't know what it's like. The more mortality dawns upon me, the more I realize, like, whoa, you know, like so many existential activities could have been conducted, but where is it all going? Like, there's this feeling in me, as if like whatever type of lifestyles there are in the world, where is this, where is it ultimately going? Right, and to me, I'm realizing we're gonna get bored of duality and singularity, and an era of incredible multidimensionalism is gonna come. Pretty much a multidimensional renaissance, and everything's gonna happen. And this thing I'm telling viewers about the advanced civilization is that the idea of the advanced humanity is that every human being is gonna be like, wait a minute, what would the most advanced version of me look like? And then they're going to be like, okay, that version will require the most advanced world, so what would the most advanced world look like? So our minds, by attempting to wonder about this, will automatically like speed up the intellect. So think of it this way. I had a math teacher, let me share this story. I had a math teacher when I lived in Iran. And this math teacher was telling the class a story, and his story was pretty much like when he had graduated from like school in Iran. Like there was this very, I don't know, it was this complex exam for like the most sophisticated physics degree in like the country, okay? And so this guy would play soccer so much, like he had ambitions of being a soccer player, but he was also like this genius guy, like in mathematics. Not genius, but he was like very talented. And so what happens is he's telling this story, and he's saying that one day he realizes the exam's like tomorrow, and he hasn't studied. And so he has to cram for the most important exam of his life. And then he's like, okay, so how do I go about this? And he says, I attempted to solve the hardest problem first. And then what he told me was that the whole night before the exam, he didn't sleep. And the whole night he was just constantly like solving the problem. Solving the hardest problem, and he finally did it. And when he solved this hardest problem, it was time to go to the exam. And when he went to the exam, because he had solved the most he had understood and solved the most complex problem, all the other problems were easy for him, and he got a very high grade, right? And he was telling me, whatever you do, try to solve the most hardest, most complex thing. So when I look at reality, I'm like, what's the most complex thing? And I think about it, it's like the outcome of the future of all this human activity on this rock. So what is the greatest problem to solve? The greatest problem to solve is to try to accurately pinpoint what we are, so then we can capably readjust civilization to it. You see, our ancestors, like we laugh at early times, they were like, yo, they were so primitive, you know? But we don't realize we are still living in civilization 1.0. We are living in the first prototype of a globalized planet, which is not. It's like through the internet, it's only globalized. Honestly, without the internet, there would be so much racism. You know, like people don't realize. Like some people have to write theses on this or something. Like the internet, 100% got rid of so much racism. Because it made human beings realize we're freaking human beings before we ascribe language and value subjectively to the object. It's like we're not even like the color of our skin. Everybody's red. They say 70% the body is liquid, right? And it's like 70% of our body is like, you know, its color is red. We're all technically red beings, you know. Anyways. Where can I go with this? Yeah, I'm just saying, just rely on your own life force. Rely on your own eyes. At some point, the person's gonna be like, man, I've been depending on so many different types of systems. Then what am I, though? You know? The person's like, man, I've seen divinity everywhere except in the mirror. Like, what's up with that, right? I think that it's very common sense that we are an evolutionary animal, and the evolution of the animal was a dependency on the change of a physical environment. But actually, in these modern times, due to the renaissance of the information age, our subjective environment, that means what's happening, is so hilarious that in the globalization of the information age, we actually don't need to travel where we can see. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, the species is shifting from behaving like an animal in a forest to behaving like, how would I say it? To behaving like this might sound bizarre, but there's a feeling I have that what is an object, like, we're right now in the phase of, we're in this no longer be a particle, but like where it can no longer be existence, right? So what it is, I don't know. You know, I just ask myself, like, let's say everybody had freedom and everybody became the most creative version of themselves. At some point I would ask, like, what's the point of consciousness being capable to convert chaos into order? And the word cosmos, which we ascribe to everything in the observable universe and the unobservable, it means order. What it means is that we are an intelligence that is not just here to emotionally dance through the chaos, but at the same time to analytically structure, right? So that one of the beautiful things about, I would say, the brain is that it's behaving like a designer. Like in this anime show DBZ, like the main character was from a warrior species. I would say human beings living now, we're from a designer species. Like, people think aesthetics and philosophy is like the weakest branch of philosophy, but it's actually the direction of the future. We are seeking the beauty of a freedom that constantly surpasses its limits, okay? Like the whole self-help industry, all the motivational speakers, they're just like, surpass your limits, go beyond your limitations, you know, like, you know, staying weak is nothing to be ashamed of, you know. Or sorry, being weak is nothing to be ashamed of, staying weak is, like, all these motivational directions of the human being to be this intense energy and force, right? But the idea to me is that the force is limited to the understanding of the mover. So what it means is, like, if you look at the species and you treat the human body, the biological system, as a vehicle, like a car, like, you can say out of 8 billion human beings, maybe like 40% of them are actually know they're in the vehicle. 40% don't even know why they're in the vehicle. They have no vision. It's as if, like, to be born in an unknown world is to be like is to be like someone in a vehicle that's appeared out of nowhere in an unknown road, right? So the idea is, do you have GPS coordinates? Do you have a vision? And what I've realized is the species doesn't have GPS coordinates for the future. You know, I went on this sophisticated, my brother yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, showed me this AI software. Okay, open AI, and it blew my mind. Like, I looked at my brother and I'm like, did the world just end? You know? But but this blew my mind, right? And what I'm trying to tell the viewers is that we have reached that point in history where all the things that made us human, technology is going to do, and we're going to be like, what now? And so it's going to come a time where the caterpillar has to step out of the cocoon. You know. And you know, I ask, you know, like, sometimes I have, like, I wonder about things, and poetically my mind, you know, resolves those wonderings. There's moments where I've wondered, I'm like, universe, what's the point of advancing communication in the void? What's the point? What's the point of biological creatures having ears and mouths, and the cosmos being so big? And I'm like, no way. The purpose of it is that we're designed not to just be creatures that speak on Earth. We're designed for creatures to speak with interstellar entities. So our mouths, our biological design, is the proof of future extraterrestrial contact. Because who are we here to communicate to? Just to each other, or to the world? Imagine somebody poetically says, like, the Great Grand Canyon is like the yawn of the planet. I honestly think human beings don't know what to trust, and in not knowing what to trust, emotionally end up deciding. So for me, I have different approaches where I'm like, okay, before I move my body, how far can my mind move in the moment? And then, based on how the furthest my probability of how my mind can move in the moment, I move in accordance to that. So you can establish a different sort of interface relationship. I've reached a point where I can geometrically, like, I've even adjusted it to my hand movement, so I can raise my hand in the air, and in my inner realms, which, think of it as like this invisible canvas overlaid upon everything I see in the outer realms, I can project geometrical shapes and them having move in accordance to my fingertips. So what I'm saying is, it's like, based on the more you get acquainted with the nature of your mind, the more you trust what you are, the more of what you are has an opportunity to enter in the conscious mind. It's piloting through something that may be even beyond the space-time continuum. When your soul opens the mind store from within, It's another way of saying the seeker of truth dissolves before truth is attained. So the person's running after truth is about to grab truth, and right before they grab truth, they start fading out. And it's this poetic suggestion that the one who is seeking truth, if it stops seeking truth, what can truth then be? This is why Lao Tzu said action through inaction. Sometimes our most advanced states are noticed in the most simplest ways. That means you might be fascinated that if you just become content with simplicity. I'm not saying be an extreme minimalist, but I'm saying like if you become content with simplicity. Then a lot of complexity can come and go and you're untouched. So anyways, there's so much to say about this topic, but I think the poetry of Rumi was very important. I want to thank the viewers for listening, and I'm trying to do this more where share, subscribe, like, comment, and when it comes to commenting, right, I want to ask the viewers, what do you think, like, the purpose of the soul being able to do anything with a mind, body, position, or situation is? Like, what do you think the purpose of, the soul opening the greatness of the mind is, or whatnot? Anyways, thanks for listening. Much blessings, and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise, and still happy New Year. Namaste.